from our All Flyers, All PHLY show. What a great job he does. You got to follow him, read him, watch him, you name it. Charlie O'Connor joins us. Charlie, good morning.
Hey, Anthony, how you doing?
Good to see you, buddy. So today's the day for the NHL draft lottery. I figured this is a perfect day to talk to you about just the direction for the offseason. So Flyers can get as high as number 2. First, let's look at this draft. Can you give me some of the top prospects kind of looking at this thing? Any difference makers? Obviously, they need offense.
Yeah, it's a good draft, actually. At least where the Flyers are likely to pick, I like this draft. Now, there's a very clear number 1. That's Macklin Celebrini. The Flyers are not going to get him because there's no way he's not going number 1. And as you mentioned, even if the Flyers win the lottery tonight, the highest they can jump up is to 2. So they wouldn't get Celebrini. But after Celebrini, there is a tier probably from 2 to around somewhere between like 12 and 14. I would say 13. Some people would argue 14. Some people might even argue 15. But that second tier, all those guys are kind of around the same in terms of how they're generally viewed in front offices and NHL teams, in the sense that none of them are sure things. They all have some things they got to work on, but they all, in theory, have top of the lineup upside. So really, even if the Flyers do not win the lottery tonight and they end up staying, the most likely scenario is that they stay at 12. If you look at the numbers, there's about an 86% chance they stay at 12. There's about a 9% chance they drop to 13. And then there's about a 5% chance they jump to 2. So most likely they're staying at 12. But even if they stay at 12, they're going to get someone who's in that second tier. It's just that if you pick at 2, you have your choice of everybody. Whereas if you pick at 12 or 13, you just kind of got to take whoever's left. But either way, they're going to get a really good prospect, I think.
So when you look at the story of this offseason, right? Because you're watching the NHL playoffs, and I always get FOMO watching the NHL playoffs. Every year comes around, and it's just incredible theater. And of course, I root against Boston, and Boston just sticks it up my gigi. Right, like I'm the Maple Leafs. How many Game 7s you're going to lose to Boston? It's incredible. And last night they come out and just absolutely destroy Florida. So how do you get back? Right, the path to building this thing, Jonesy and Danny Briere. That's the mission. What's the story of this offseason?
Well, I think this offseason I'm expecting it to be. I'm not expecting a ton of big splashes. I think there could be a hockey trade or two. Maybe a guy on the roster they trade for a player who they think is better, fits this roster better. I'm expecting it to be a young player. Like, I don't expect them to trade away, one of their under 25 guys for a vet to try to sneak into the playoffs. I could see them trading away, a guy who's 24, 25 for a guy who's 22, 23, who they think has high-end talent and could turn into a better player than the guy they're trading. I could see that. In terms of what they need, I think this is more of a long-term question because I don't necessarily think it's going to be solved this summer. But what they have is a bunch of legitimately talented support players. Travis Konecny is probably the closest guy they have to a star, but even he's not the kind of guy who would be the star player, the guy on a Stanley Cup contender. They obviously have Matvei Michkov, who we'll see when he comes over.
I saw the workout picture. I saw the workout. So he's working out, and he's got a Flyers T-shirt on, and you're like, wow. Like you're starting. Well, before we get to everything else, what do you think about it? Like, what are the odds that I know it's impossible to kind of forecast because you're dealing with Russia, but how do you think that plays out?
I think they opened the door a bit for the possibility of him coming over next season. I'm not expecting it. I still think it would be a long shot. I do believe, though, that it to me, and I said this on PHLY last week, on PHLY Flyers, that it makes it feel more likely that his KHL team, because he has 2 more years left on his KHL contract, it makes it more likely to me that they might let him out of his contract a year early rather than right now. But the door is at least open. I think still the most likely scenario is that they're going to have to wait the 2 years. But I could very easily see them saying, well, we got one good year out of him on our main KHL team. Now let's work out some sort of arrangement where you can go over and we'll terminate the final year of the deal, like the KHL team did for Ivan Fedotov a few months ago when he came over. But yeah, I mean, Michkov, I view him as a potential superstar. So you've got one guy, you've got that guy. Obviously, he still needs to prove it.
Who's the comp, Chow?
The comp?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny when I covered the draft last year and Danny Briere was asked that very question. He had a fantastic answer, and his answer was, Michkov is the kind of guy that future Russia prospects will be compared to him. Like, it's not fair to comp him to a guy because he's that good. Like, if I had to give you a comp, I think probably the best comp in terms of best case scenario is like Nikita Kucherov, who scored like 1,000 points this year.
Yes,
so that would be really, really good.
Cooch. Oh my God.
But yeah, I mean, he's the kind of guy where if he hits, you're comparing all the best Russia prospects to him for the next 10 years. Yeah,
and you know, it's funny because he's exactly who they need, right? Like when you think about that, they don't have a top line, right? So you need someone that can anchor a top line that could just put the puck in the net, and that's what gets you so excited about him.
Yeah, so you got Michkov coming, whether that's this year, next year, or the year after. He's going to be here. You know, one thing about that workout today that it shows is I don't know when he's coming, but it's clear he wants to be a Flyer. He's working out in Flyers gear. That sends a message like, I want to be in the NHL. So you got him. That's one piece. I do think that ideally you need that number one defenseman, and more than anything, you need that number one center. And that's where you're hoping this draft provides that, because there are a lot of really good defensemen in this draft that have number one defensive potential, and there are a few centers who, not as many, obviously Celebrini's one, but they're not going to get him. There are a few centers who could have that kind of upside. You're hoping that maybe this draft, the Flyers, you're not going to know for a year or two, of course, because these guys aren't going to jump in right away, but maybe this draft they fill one of those holes and they're a step closer to having the kind of team that can make the playoffs again and then be a championship contender again.
Charlie O'Connor with us, does such a great job on our all PHLY Flyers with Bill Matz. We got to talk to him about his Ranger Suarez take, but other than that, it's all good. Chow, what did you learn from this season? When you take a look at this season, what did you learn from this team, and who did you learn specifically about?
Well, I think you learn, number one, that this team, while it does need more talent, it probably has more talent than we thought it did going into the year. You learn things about guys like Cam York, that he could potentially be, he definitely is a top 4 NHL defenseman, could be a top pair guy. You learn that Travis Sanheim can thrive under John Tortorella, which was a serious question last season. Well, 2 seasons ago, I guess now, when he clashed with the coach. You learn that Travis Konechny, that breakout year 2 seasons ago, that wasn't a fluke, that he's actually that good. You learn that Tyson Forrester might have legitimate first liner potential. I think you learned a lot of really good things. You learned that this is a tight team that plays for each other. You learn that they have a good culture in the locker room. And you learn that they can play an exciting style of play. They switch to more of a rush-based offense, which I think is the way that, generally speaking, you need to succeed if you want to be a Stanley Cup contender in the modern NHL. So you saw a lot of really good things. The big thing, and we just talked about it, they need better players. And I think Jonesy and Danny know that. They get it. Now it's just a matter of whether they can get those guys.
Yeah, and listen, we know that it's an investment of time. Like, fans are always going to get impatient and go, especially when the playoffs are around. It's intoxicating, right? So you're like, oh my God, it's still going to be another 2-3 years before you have some sort of contender. But that's truly what the job needs.
Yeah, and I think Briere has that kind of patience. I think he showed it. He proved that he has it when, in the lead up to the trade deadline, the Flyers are sitting in a playoff spot. they're looking pretty good. I mean, they're looking like they're a team that, they're not a cup contender, but, maybe they could pull an upset in the first round, whatever. Danny's got a defenseman in Sean Walker, who's on an expiring contract, who's probably not going to be part of the future, given the fact that you traded for Jamie Drysdale, who kind of plays that same role. You've got Oliver Bonk, another right-handed shooting defenseman, who's going to be ready in a few years. Doesn't make sense to re-sign Sean Walker. Maybe it makes sense if you really want to make the playoffs and maybe put a scare into a team in the first round. Maybe you keep them. But if you're talking about the rebuild, if you're talking about patience, if you're talking about stockpiling assets, made more sense to trade them for a first-round pick, and that's what they did. And I think that proved that Briere does have the patience necessary to see this through. Now, whether he makes the right moves with that patience, we'll see. He could identify the wrong players in the draft or via trade or whatever, but I do think he has the patience. I think he showed that.
All right, so I'm with you. It's really testing our patience is what it is. Because, listen, for Danny, the job is the job. Like, you have to have patience with it. For the fan goes, man, I've been having patience since 2010, right? Like, so it's been a bit. So let me ask you a question, just a sports question. Could it be that at 28 years old, you have finally are injury-free, you're no dealing with any kind of hassles, immigration, paperwork, all that stuff, and that you can go to, say, spring training, and you can go clean, right? And now you assume a role that you know is your role in a rotation. And could it be that you blossom and there is no regression?
It is possible. It's happened before. I cannot rule out the possibility that Ranger Suarez will continue to pitch at a Cy Young level the rest of the year. I do not think it's likely. I also do not think I was wrong in saying that he is not a star. Hey, if he wins the Cy Young this year, then I'll call him a star. But I'm not ready to go there after one amazing
and listen,
not yet.
Nobody's calling him an ace right now, but my only argument, it's fun and it's funny, you're a good sport, is that I look at his stuff, I look at his demeanor on the mound, I look at his last two postseasons, I look at how each of the seasons started, and I go, listen, I think this is who he is. He knows how to pitch, right? He's got great command. He's got his delivery's effortless, right? There's not a lot of ridiculous action where you're worrying about, fear of injury, and he's never gets flustered. So I couple all that, and understanding how to pitch is a huge thing. I think sometimes you get it, especially when, you're dealing with all the external stuff like injuries and, coming from another country.
I would love to see it. And I think that's something that kind of got lost in the tweet controversy from this weekend, which I tweeted out. I was at the game on Saturday watching it in a rainstorm, and I tweeted that. And I was surprised at the backlash I got because the original tweet was, I think that Ranger Suarez is the Carlos Ruiz of this era of the Phillies. And I meant that as a compliment because I think extremely highly of Ranger Suarez. I also think extremely highly of Carlos Ruiz. I mean, I was in college during the height of the late 2000s Phillies run. I had a Carlos Ruiz jersey. He was Senor Octubre. He caught multiple no-hitters. He got MVP votes in 3 years. Like, I viewed that as a compliment.
He actually turned into
a really love.
And he actually turned into a pretty good fastball hitter. Like he turned himself into, and he was, as Doc Halladay would have attested to, he was the guy everybody loved to throw to.
Yeah. So for me, like the point I was making was that I don't view Ranger as a star. Maybe if he wins a Cy Young this year, I'll change my tune. I don't view him as a star, but I view him as like the fan favorite. Like, and I love Ranger. I'm on record as saying last year that I trust Ranger Suarez significantly more than I trust Aaron Nola.
I'll throw this at you. I think he could be a 2.
I could see it. I could see it.
Yeah, we agree.
Right now, I trust him more than Nola, and so. But I don't. I said this to JP when I got into the office yesterday. If I'm calling somebody a star, if you go into a season with World Series designs and Ranger Suarez is your number one, you're not comfortable with that. If he's your number two or your number three, that's a different story.
No, we agree.
But
no,
I don't
Wheeler
think it's
is your race. I mean, I agree with you. Hey, where you headed in Italy?
Going to Rome, and then the wedding I'm going to this weekend is like an hour northwest of Rome, right on the beach. So it's a destination wedding.
What's the town? Do you know? You remember where it is?
Ladispoli. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it correctly.
Okay, I got you. I got your tips over. That's my area. You know.
Okay.
No,
all
seriously.
right.
My wife has a travel company, an Italian travel company.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
so she knows.
Yeah.
Whatever you need. All right, we got people there too.
All right.
All right.
All right. Let me know. I'll be there for a bit.
Listen, our tentacles go across the world, man. All right. Hey, listen, we love you, buddy. You're the best, man. Have a great trip. Enjoy your vacation. Well deserved, bud.
Ciao, Charlie.
All right. Thanks so much, Ant. Thanks, JP.
See you, buddy.
We all city like the mayor.